Welcome, everybody. This is the Tuesday, June 7th, 2022 Town Council meeting. We're starting at 6:15 because this is actually a closed session. With that, can we get a roll call, please, Rebecca?
Councilmember Beckman?
Here.
Councilmember Mongan?
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Here.
Vice Mayor Lee?
Here.
And Mayor Casissa?
Here. And before we adjourn to a closed session, I'm going to open up the meeting for public comment. Gives anybody from the public opportunity to comment on the item that we will be discussing in closed session. I don't see any attendees either via Zoom or in person. Did we get any email comments in?
We did not receive any emailed public comments.
Thanks. And with that, I will go ahead and close public session, and we are going to adjourn to our closed session meeting. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're back out of closed session, and there's nothing to report from our closed session meeting. We will go back and do one thing. We did take a roll call, and I did call the meeting to order before we went into closed session. If we can just stand and salute the flag, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And as I mentioned before, there was nothing to report out of the closed session. With that, I will go ahead and open up the meeting for public comment. This gives anybody from the public opportunity to speak on anything that is not on our agenda. And with that, I do see one hand raised. And just a quick note, we do not have any members of the public present in the chambers at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Casissa. Just my timer is being a little slow. Okay, my timer is now in the meeting. So with that, I will unmute Margaret Vandell to speak and provide public comment.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to remind anybody who's listening and everyone there that tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, there's a very important community conversation meeting by Zoom about short-term rentals. And I hope that everybody who's interested will be able to participate. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I don't see any other hands raised. Do we have any comments via email?
Just quickly refreshing my email, and no, we did not receive any additional emailed public comments.
Thank you.
We did receive a public comment email that was submitted prior to the publication of the agenda packet, and it was included in the agenda materials.
Okay, all right, thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll go to presentations. We have two proclamations tonight under presentations. The first one is declaring June 19th, 2022 as Juneteenth Day of Observation. And as mayor, I'm going to go ahead and just read the following. I'm not going to read the whole proclamation. I will read the bottom part of it. In the town of Corte Madera, and encourage all residents to celebrate this day by honoring and reflecting on the significant role that African Americans have played in the history of the United States, and how African Americans have enriched society through their steadfast commitment to promoting unity and equality. And then the second proclamation we have is declaring June 2022 as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus, LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And again, I'm just going to read through the bottom part, which is in the town of Corte Madera, and encourage all residents to celebrate the LGBTQ plus community and to remember that this nation was founded on the principle that every individual has infinite dignity and worth. So again, those are the two proclamations under presentation. Are there any comments from any council members? No. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak on proclamations that the town has declared? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. And again, we have no members of the present public. Any emails come in, Rebecca?
Just refreshing my email one more time, and I'm still not seeing any raised hands, and we did not receive any emailed public comments.
Thank you. With that, I will go ahead and close public comment and we'll move to the consent calendar. These are items that are in the normal course of business. They can be approved by a single motion and have been previously discussed. Any member of the town council, town staff, or public may request that an item be removed for further discussion. With that in mind, is there anybody from the town council, staff, or the public that wishes to have an item removed for further discussion? And I don't see any hands raised. Any emails come in?
There were no emailed comments on the consent calendar.
Yeah, thank you. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment and I will bring it back to town council for a possible motion to approve consent items 4A through 4G.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No? Okay, I'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Councilmember Beckman,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lee,
Yes.
Mayor Casissa.
Yes. And with that, we'll move to public hearings. We have one public hearing tonight. We will be reviewing the proposed town operating budget for fiscal year 2022-23, and we will be providing a direction to staff, and this is a 2-meeting item. And with that, I will turn it over to our wonderful finance director.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. You have before you in the binder the proposed budget for next fiscal year 2022-23. And this includes all the town's funds as listed on page 13 and includes a complete description of the funds on pages 14 and 15. And the sanitary district will be discussed separately. So this is just about the other funds, not the sanitary district. And I've divided the budget into 3 general sections. The first being the general fund. And this is the operating fund, which is the town's primary fund and is used for the day-to-day transactions and recurring revenues and expenditures. And a summary of the general fund is shown on page 17. And you can see there that the revenue, which and transfers in totals approximately $22.9 million. And the expenditures and transfers out total about $21.5 million. So that indicates that there's an operating surplus projected for that fiscal year. And just some of the highlights of the revenue. You can see that revenue is increasing by over $287,000 compared to the estimated revenue for this fiscal year, the current fiscal year. And property tax accounts for 35% of the town's general fund. And it's expected to increase by $257,000, which is a nearly 4% increase to the secured property tax, which is the biggest portion of the property tax. You could see on the next pages on 18 and 19 a further breakdown of each of the types of revenues. You can see by far that the secured property tax is the largest type of revenue. And that revenue is increasing by 4%, and then an overall increase to property tax by 3.3%. That information was based on information that we received from the county, but just, I think, maybe yesterday or maybe Friday, we received an update that the secured property tax is actually going to increase by 5.91%. So that'll be an extra $81,000 that's not included in this document. So you can also see that sales tax accounts for a large portion of the budget in the general fund, about 37%. And this is only the basic 1% sales tax. This is not the Corte Madera local sales tax, which is in a separate fund and will be discussed a little later. HDL is the town sales tax consultant. And this is where we got the estimate of the $8.2 million for next year. And it's approximately 1.2 million more than the amount expected in the current year. If you look at those sales tax numbers, you can see that they vary, and that's really because there have been overpayments from the state that had to be repaid, and then sometimes they crossed years, so that's why it looks kind of odd like that. But if you take the overpayments and the repayments into account and put them in the right year, then the sales tax revenue for this year would be increasing 4%. That's what we expect, as opposed to the last year, even though it looks like it's going down because of those items, that were incorrect and crossed years, and then another 2.5% in. Yeah, so this is page, I'm on page 17. Thank you. And then the transient occupancy tax, the hotel tax, is budgeted at the same level as the revised budget, which is 42% more than the revenue received in the previous year. And the projected revenue for both the current year and next year is about 2/3 of the revenue that was received prior to the pandemic. And it may need to be further adjusted because one of the hotels in town is going to be remodeled. And then the federal funds, the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, there was one about $1.6 million. That's not, or $1.16 million. That's not going to be received next year because it'll be received this year, and it was received last year. And though it was just intended to mitigate the effects of the pandemic, it's not an ongoing type of thing. So those are the major changes to the revenue. And there's more detail on pages 18 through 22 about the different types of revenue. Did you want me to have questions at this point, or just continue with the?
If you don't mind. Why don't you go through everything, and then we'll hold all questions to the end, if that's
Okay. And then, okay, so then the expenditures, which were on page 7, that page 17, are also shown in a different way on page 23. On page 23, it's showing the information by department, whereas before it was, major categories such as salaries, benefits, and so forth. And there are pages following this, each of the sections here that show all about the different departments. But some of the things that may stand out on this page 23 are admin and finance is increasing by about $225,000, or nearly 15%. And the main increase is due to the addition of a climate action manager position to help develop a process to prioritize climate and sustainable actions, oversee grants, engage the public, and act as a coordinator. And this is $180,000, a contract position. It's not an employee, it's a contract position. And also included in admin and finance, $30,000 for business license administration. That had previously been handled by a town employee, and it's now handled by this company HDL, the same company as the sales tax consultants. And as of right now, the town has actually received $59,000 more in the current year than it did for all of last year. And that's only the revenue through April. So there's 2 more months. So actually making more money having it done outside. You'll notice fire services have increased by about $315,000, or 6.5%. And that's mainly due to salary increases that were previously agreed to, 2 to 3%, depending on the unit, mostly 3%. Plus scheduled step increases. There's a lot of employees who have not reached the maximum step, so they receive a step increase of 5%. And then there's 2 additional positions as compared to to this current year, the budget, because there were 2 employees added. One is a fire inspector who started last December, and then there's an additional firefighter paramedic who's in training and will replace an employee who is expected to retire, employee on leave. And then there was also pretty large increase in workers' compensation premiums and claims. Workers' compensation increased by about $77,000. Police services have increased by 6.9%, $257,000. And there's information on pages 58 and 59 of this binder that was provided by the police chief. And it shows that most of those increases are due to salary and related costs, and also to insurance and various contract services. You'll notice mayor and town council line item, that increase is due to $14,000 in election costs, that because there's an election scheduled and there wasn't in the current fiscal year. You'll notice that retiree health benefits are decreasing by more than $350,000. And that's the result of the extra payment, the $990,000 that was made in this year from the previous year's surplus. The town council decided to put that into that OPEB trust. And in this year's budget, this proposed budget, a payment of $638,000 is included. And that represents the savings from the pension obligation bonds that were issued last year. And then you'll see townwide expenses there. You might notice a large decrease from the previous year, and that's because there were some costs associated with the pension obligation bonds and the certificates of participation. Let's see, in pension liability, of course, you probably already know that in the previous year, that nearly $20 million, that was the result of paying off that pension obligation with the proceeds of the bonds, and that was 18.6 million. And the biggest change, you'll see transfers out going from $6.1 million in this year to $600,000 in this proposed budget. And that's because there were several transfers approved at the mid-year budget that were mostly from the previous year's unallocated ending fund balance. And you can see them, there was a transfer to the insurance fund, an additional $250,000. The original budget was $600,000. That was to fund claims. The transfer to the equipment fund was increased by $1 million, and that's intended to be used for cybersecurity and furniture and technology for the new building. And then that transfer to capital projects line consists of, it was $1.5 million from the previous year's unallocated budget. And then the rest of that are those ARPA funds, those federal funds that are going to be used to pay for police services, which in turn frees up money that can be used for capital projects. So overall, the expenditures and transfers are increasing by $4.9 million compared with the current year, but that's really, a lot of it, approximately 5.5%, 5.5 million, were those one-time transfers, and they're being offset by some of the increases that were discussed. And in the staff report, it explains how overall salaries are increasing by $203,000 and other benefits by $140,000. So in total, not including the transfers out, the expenditures have increased by about 3.2%. And then one item of note is that although the unfunded liability payment this year of $390,000 is included in the budget, the town's financial advisors have indicated that once the returns for the last fiscal year, which, because CalPERS's actuarial reports are generally behind, once they're included, the town's liability will actually be overfunded. So I don't expect that the town will have to make a payment next year for that. And then another financial advisor just said last week that although this year's, the current year that we're in, that ends on June, although those investment returns from CalPERS are actually expected to be negative, the town will still be fully funded, even in this person's estimation, even when those negative returns like a year from now are included. So shouldn't have to make any pension liability payment, after this for at least, for some time. I don't know how long, but not immediately, probably. And then on page 17, There is, it shows the components of the ending fund balance. And so at the bottom down there where it says ending fund balance. And staff is estimating that based on the current budget, the 20% reserve will be met. That's the reserve that was set by town council policy in both the current and in the next fiscal year. And you'll see the fund balance decreasing from 18.3 million to 8.4 million. So, over 2 years. And that's because the proceeds of the certificates of participation of $7.6 million are included in that ending balance. And they're expected to be spent on the town hall construction. And then those one-time transfers, totaling more than $5 million that were just discussed. So as the end of June 30th of 2023, the estimated unassigned portion of the ending balance will be approximately $2.5 million. Should I move on to the capital funds? Okay. All right. So that's the general fund. And then the capital funds begin on page 71, where I've listed all of the capital projects for 2023 that are included in this budget. And the page shows the funding source for each of the projects, as well as the projects themselves. And some of these funds do actually roll up to the general fund in the financial statements, but we have them segregated on the town's books for transparency and for tracking. And the total capital funds budget, as you see at the bottom, is $17,745,000. And of this amount, you can see there's a line item that says, down here where it says town-owned facilities towards the bottom. You can see that $11 million plus, some cost for temporary offices and for design are total $11,735,000, which is about 2/3 of the capital budget. And $11 million will be paid from the COP proceeds and the town capital projects fund. That's that fund that was set up with the transfer of the unallocated ending fund balance and the savings from the ARPA funds. And then an additional $1.4 million is expected to be spent in the following fiscal year, which is not shown here because this is just a one-year budget. So, and it's expected that the Corte Madera sales tax will pay for the majority of that. And so the remainder of the budget includes, as you can see here, the streets and roads right here, that's totaling about $3.6 million, flood control and storm drainage, and then some town park restrooms, and then at the bottom there, the housing element. And of this, about $4.3 million will be spent from the Corte Madera sales tax fund. You can see at the last column, it says Corte Madera sales tax, and then at the bottom you can see. And then the other funds that are included here, as that will be helping to pay for the capital budget funds is the capital improvement fund. That includes grants and also the TAM revenue, the Transportation Authority of Marin revenue. And these revenue sources are expected to pay for about $956,000 in capital projects, mainly streets and roads, and also the town park restroom project in part. And then the road maintenance and rehabilitation fund and the gas tax funds are from the state and can only be used for street and road expenditures. And the budget includes about $478,000 for those two combined. The Street Impact Fees Fund that collects fees related to construction projects. And those fees are intended to help defray the impact to streets and roads. And $500,000 for projects is included in that fund. And then the Recreation Capital Fund is a fund that was established years ago, and a portion of recreation fees that were collected were deposited into the fund. And that's no longer the case. There's not any deposits being made into that fund, but there was a balance that was carried over from previous years. And most of it is budgeted for the town park restroom project in this budget. And then the Measure A Parks Fund is a tax which expired in March. And it's actually on the ballot today for renewal. And while it was in effect, it was a 0.25% sales tax. And then of the money received, the cities received 15% of the revenue, which was distributed and allocated by the county. And so there was, there's still some money in that fund, even though it's sunsetted. And so that is also planned for the town park bathroom project. So, and then in terms of the Corte Madera sales tax fund, which is on pages 76 and 77 of this document, you can see that there are things other than, excuse me, it's on, 76 and 77. You can see that not only are capital projects in this budget, in this fund, but the sales tax fund does also pay for other things such as disaster preparedness and flood control. Well, that's capital, but it also pays for senior and youth programs of $150,000. The debt service payments for the certificates of participation, which were issued to build town hall. Those are the general items that are paid for by this fund. I did want to comment that in the budget message on page 10, I did list fire prevention and disaster preparedness twice. That first line is not in the budget. You could cross that out, but these pages 76 and 77 are the budget. And then the previous page, page 75, shows that there's projected to be an ending fund balance of about $6 million at the end of the year. And that does include the 2.5% reserve. So the revenue shown on this page is correct. We haven't had those sort of issues with the state with regard to this fund. It's been fine. So those are the capital funds. And then beginning on page 85 is what I call other funds. And these funds are not part of the operating fund or the capital fund, but do need to be tracked separately. And most of them do roll up, or not most of them, some of them roll up to the general fund in the financial statements, but they're separated here so we can see what's going on with them. And the equipment and technology fund on page 86, that's totally funded by the general fund. It doesn't have any source of revenue of its own. And you can see that additional $1 million that was transferred this year. So there's no transfer necessary next year because that should, so the total of $1.2 million should be enough money. And then the $1 million that you see as the ending balance, that's what will be spent on the cybersecurity and the technology and the furniture for the new building when it's completed. The insurance fund also relies on the general fund for funding, and that's where claims and premiums related to workers' compensation and property and liability insurance is recorded. And property and liability insurance increased by 57% this year. And so there's a $600,000 transfer, which is actually is less than the $850,000 that was transferred this year. And that additional transfer was again with some of that unallocated ending fund balance. So the ending balance there is $467,000. And then the Park Madera Center Fund, that's a fund that was established to track the rental income and debt service payments, regarding Park Madera Center, which the town owns. And years ago, there was a deficit, which the town has been paying down. And at this time, the rental income is expected to cover the debt service repayment, although the fund balance still is negative. $300,000 was transferred from the general fund into this fund this year, as approved by the council, which did help reduce the deficit. And then The last fund is the Recreation Fund, which was briefly discussed at the last meeting, and that's beginning on page 90. This fund is related to Parks and Recreation revenue and expenditures. And the goal of the fund is to be self-supporting, and as was discussed at the previous meeting, the general fund pays for about $400,000 worth of expenditures for the Recreation Fund, and in the past has also transferred about $200,000 to the Recreation Fund. So as shown on page 20, the Recreation Fund is expected to meet its goal of being self-supporting in the current and upcoming years. However, the following two pages, page 92 and 93, show the impact of the support from the general fund, and that without the $400,000 that is charged to the general fund, the fund would be running a deficit in both years. And then so that's the last of the town budget. And as you can see, all the funds look in good shape. And I'm sure you've all heard that there's possible recession expected. And we feel that we've built options into the budget if that were to happen, so that wouldn't be, very disastrous. For one thing, the town is saving approximately $800,000 a year is the average that we expect on those pension obligation bonds. And so currently, the last 2 years, we've put the money into the OPEB trust. But with what we've been putting into the OPEB trust, once we have the actuarial fund or the actuarial study finished, we expect that fund the OPEB liability will be funded by about 80%. So if necessary, the town could use that $800,000 that they're saving from the pension bonds and not put it into the OPEB trust if there was some sort of emergency, spend it on something else. Also, that OPEB trust could be used to pay for the town's retiree health benefits, which it's not doing now. There's about $5 million in there right now. And then there'll be, that additional $600,000 next year if this budget is approved. And right now the retiree benefits are being paid in the manner referred to by pay as you go by the actuary. It's about $500,000. So if necessary, that OPEB trust could be used to meet those obligations. And then also the pension trust that was set up, which currently we're not putting any money into this year because we don't expect any unfunded liability, but there's still about $3.5 million in there, which if necessary could be used to pay the town's normal costs, the employer portion of PERS, which is the service accrual cost for employees for the current year. So that could be used to pay for that as well if necessary. There is that 20% reserve, which is about nearly $4.3 million, which, best practice wouldn't recommend paying ongoing expenses with that because it's, just one-time money that can only be spent once. But if there were some sort of an emergency or something, that is there, as well as $2.5 million in the sales tax fund as reserve. And although the sales tax fund now is being used only for those items that I listed, it could technically, with council's approval, if there was some big emergency, be spent on something else. So that is the town's proposed budget. And then the sanitary district will be discussed separately.
Thanks. Great report, by the way, and great
Thank you.
presentation on the
Thank you.
materials. You gave us a lot of information. It's all good stuff.
Thank
So
you.
appreciate that. With that, let me go ahead and open up to town council for any questions. Eli.
Thank you, Fred. I have a handful of, I think, relatively quick questions. Daria, thank you so much. That was, as always, just really clear, easy to digest budget. So thank you to you and your staff and everybody who worked on this. I know it was a team effort, including, our finance committee and our sales
Yes,
tax oversight
definitely.
committee. So thank you all. Just a few questions. So the pension stabilization 115 trust, with 3.7 million in it, even though we're not expecting any of those kind of CalPERS costs to come up in the near future. Is that something that we just hang on to in case CalPERS runs into a bunch of bad years and we start to generate more unfunded liability?
It could be spent for that, or it could be spent for the normal cost
Right.
of retirement. Right. It can't be used, as
Right.
far as I know, to pay for anything else.
Okay. And what does that normal cost look like annually?
For next year, it's $327,000.
Okay, so we do have many years of normal costs in that
Right.
trust.
Yeah, that's for the general fund. There's a little bit also charged to other funds. you know,
Sure.
But that's the bulk of it. Yes.
That's helpful. Thank you. Another question. This might be a Todd question. Our $600,000 insurance, like premium, we'll call it, how does that stack up to other agencies in the risk pool?
Very similar. We're a little bit better because on the they call them the X mods on our past history, we've really lived a blessed life over the last 5 years. I don't want to say what that is because I don't want to jinx us, but we're doing well. So our X mod is actually in the top 10% in the risk pool. So for best practices and really doing things the right way and not having the claims of others.
Awesome.
And we also have in there that $400,000 being carried over into the next year. That is actually a number that they actuarially evaluate and say, you could take 3 full claim hits of up to our retention limit, which is $100,000 per lawsuit. So we are actuarially funded the way we should be. So we're in really good shape as it relates to the insurance fund.
Great, thank you. Another question, I was curious, what's the kind of current lay of the land with regards to sales tax for online sales? How does that break down and what portion of that does Corte Madera get?
For online sales?
Yeah, because I know that's kind of like a sort of dynamic area right now.
Yes, right now, well, anything that's delivered to Corte Madera, of course, Corte Madera gets that sales tax. The other sales tax is divided up in the county pool, and depending on how much, it's a strange way to calculate it, depending how much of the total sales, not including online, Corte Madera receives, that's the percentage that they receive, from the county pool.
When Amazon and the Wayfair decision passed a few years ago, I mean, we saw an approximate $700,000 to $800,000 a year increase,
right,
on the online sales positively to
Yes.
our sales tax. So
that's great.
It's a big number.
Great, thank you. Just 2 more questions. Park Madera Fund, and I may be misunderstanding, I'm not a finance person, but it looked like we've got a roughly $1.5 million deficit in that fund, and we're paying roughly $600,000 a year on debt service. Is it correct that paying off that 1.5 million deficit would eliminate that $600,000 annual debt service?
No, that deficit that's shown, that's just sort of an internal thing.
Okay,
Yeah, it's listed on page 17 down here where I take it out of the ending balance, because we have to keep in mind, we really owe ourselves the money. So if we were to get rid of that, it would just be paying, moving money from the general fund to there. That was just established to keep track of the amount the town had subsidized it for. Yeah,
Got
but
it,
no, we
okay.
owe the debt service regardless of whether we do that. Yeah.
okay. I was like,
This is
wow,
a good
that's
question though. So
Yeah.
it's a discussion point that we have every year because it gets confusing for people. Remember when we purchased the shopping center, there were a period of years where, right, we paid more on it than we brought in. And so that I think actually at the peak, it was $2.4 million.
Mhm.
And then over the years, we just pay that number down in accounting practice, right, as we go. One of the things that I think we recommended this last year, and I recommend it again, if you go to page 17 at the bottom and you see the bottom right number, the 2.556 million unassigned ending balance. I mean, really, from an accounting standpoint, I feel like the true number, because it's cash on hand, we have about you should back out that 1.584 million, that is 3 lines up, the Park Madera Center deficit, and subtract it from that 2.556.
I've already
right?
backed it out. That
It is backed out.
that 2.5 assumes that,
It's
that.
even better than
yeah.
I thought. This is great. Okay, but what I recommend is that we put it to the side. We should no longer show the deficit. I think we should have the summary, show everyone the history, the historical context of decision making, put it there, it lives forever, and take it out of this general fund ledger, because it is confusing.
I
We don't
agree.
have a deficit, right?
Yeah.
We don't. from a cash standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. And then my last question, on page 55, looking at planning and building staffing levels, was just noticing that we see no customer service representative positions. Is that because they share that position with Public Works?
The customer service representative, I think the thinking is that instead of having a customer service representative, they're going to have 3 permit technicians and 1 administrative analyst. There's right now the administrative analyst position is vacant because that person was promoted to become a planner. So that's vacant. So, and I believe that one of the permit technicians will be sort of like a hybrid of customer service representative and permit technician.
If you remember the fun whiteboard session we did last time, I can bring it back out again. I love whiteboarding if you want, but
That's okay.
that's a Daria got it. But one of the things we're also looking at, especially in some of these our departments where you really need that analyst portion, you need to be cross-trained in multiple things. And instead of just being a single, just customer service front facing, we need you to do multiple things. And the admin analyst position will definitely be customer service front facing, but also have the ability to do that analysis that we need for those 2 departments, and they'll share.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Fred. And this is a really strong budget, and we're very lucky to be in this position. So thank you.
Thanks, Elon. Bob, did you want to go? No questions? Charles? Leela?
I just had one quick question. Thanks, Daria. And you mentioned the climate role, and can you remind me, is that, so you said that's gonna be a contractor. Is that a contractor that sort of works for us almost like an employee, or is that like a consulting firm that we will just engage?
So Councilmember Mongan, right now, we put it under contract services, that $180,000, but as we develop it and work with the committee and staff, it could be a contract, it could be possibly a full-time position. So we're going to bring that back to you when we complete that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, so once again, backing up Eli, it's strong budget. You did have this kind of future forecast of a potential recession, and then ultimately I think it's important, and you gave options of ways that will be covered to bring security to everybody, that it still will be fiscally sound. But also I just, it's so detailed here and we know how we would respond, but I also just wish when we make forecasts that we also analyze our income sources as a town, and then basically whether that recession that might be global or national or even local, regional, will affect our income sources and where those might happen, only because they're, some of those, like the sales tax fund, is a targeted fund that can only be attributed to different things, because in general, our town, when recessions happen, are the cost of our homes and the sales tax, property taxes, like I don't see that being affected, right? And then even when sales tax has been affected traditionally in other localities, I haven't seen it so much here. So also, I just wanted to ask do you feel that this recession basically is at a different level, or will have a different impact on the town than it traditionally has, as I understand it?
Yeah, just to start, I would tell you that I think everything's off the charts and unprecedented, and so when we look at this, you're right, property taxes are completely stable in Marin County. If you go back 30, 40 years, worst case, it'll probably flatten, right? It's not going to go in the negative. Sales tax is very violent, right, for us. When you look at our economic development and the way we're set up now, of where we're headed, when you have the inflation, right, our gas prices are going to go up. But you also have what we did back in our economic development a few years ago with the electric car dealerships. People are starting to go electric even more so. And so we solved a 5 and 10 year problem going out, but it's also going to carry us. It carried us through COVID. It's going to carry us through this. Worst case scenario, as you move forward, if you look at page 17 and you look at our reoccurring expenditures to revenue, you have a $1.2 million positive, right? More revenue to, and so that's the first piece. I do not see our sales tax going from 8.2 million to below 7.2 million. It's not going to happen. I just don't see it. And when you step back, we will then start to do that Monte Carlo type of thing of going, okay, what if COVID and comes back and they shut down those shopping centers for 2 months again, right? What happens if we have a 6.0 earthquake? Do we have the insurance coverage to get us off? And so right now we have insurance coverage. If we get a 6.0 earthquake, a $500,000 payment comes to the town of Corte Madera, right? That helps with salaries. Then we put that aside and we say, okay, now we have the revenue expenditures, we broke even. What happens? What else can happen? We're in a recession. How is the recession using all the forecasting models that we have through HDL and all the good work that Daria does? How is it going to impact us? And there's a lot of offsets to that, and to the positive. We're comfortable. And the other piece, as Daria touched on, rightfully so, is the difference between today and us and others, and in the past, is that we took the capital improvement projects, infrastructure projects out of our general fund on page 17, and we put it over to the side and said, look, we're going to attack it this way. It's a forever tax, and this is what we're doing, right? That's the first piece. The other one is stabilizing the pension trust and the pension obligation, right? And so now it's a positive. We will not, over the next 20 months, have an unfunded liability payment to CalPERS. So that also adds that extra 800,000 sitting there if we need it. Ultimately, long story short, the worst economic downturn that we've ever sustained is 2.5 million in the 2000s. You could triple that before we would have to come to you and hit our reserve at this point. And that's just where we're at. And that's not including hitting some of the other trust funds.
Yeah.
So
I think so. Thank you for that. I think that answers my question. I think the other one is basically the large state surpluses that they see in budget. Does that come back, or will that be accounted for in local budgets, or is that only back to individual taxpayers and rebates and that type of thing? Do you anticipate any kind of unknown sources that are going to come up out of that this time?
yeah, I mean, you always have to watch the state. I think there was just recently, and the mayor helped us with the letter, was the ERAF monies. They were going after some of that potentially. And so I don't know. I know that they've been really focused on some infrastructure monies coming down through public works. And so we're monitoring that, as well as some of the EV opportunities. And so we'll be really aggressive, in that area.
Okay.
I have a few. On a high level, how comfortable do you feel with the revenue numbers, property tax, sales tax, those numbers? And are they, I'm sorry, I'm going to assume, but you quote me if I'm wrong, they're somewhat conservative.
Yes, well, the property tax numbers I got from the state, from the county, most of those are from the county. Virtually all of them are from the county. And every year, if anything, they're low. I adjusted some of them up this year. And so far this year, the current year, we've already received our, more than our our budgeted property tax, and we're still set to receive 5% of the secured tax next week. So that should be fine. Yeah, the county's always very accurate about these things. The sales tax, HDL has been very accurate also. As I say, the problem is with the state allocating the money, sometimes not correctly. So it's a little bit
You
difficult.
could tell them the recent one.
No, I didn't mention the recent one. About
transparency.
about 2 weeks ago, I went online to get our apportionment number. They released it a few days before before they actually give us the money. And I was expecting, if we were going to be on track, to see about $600,000 or so, on that piece of paper, but it was $7.1 million. So I, of course, immediately called the state first thing in the morning and said, I believe there's a mistake. Maybe, can you maybe stop the wire that you're going to send us on Friday and let us know the correct amount, because we're going to actually, obviously have to send that money back. But they just sent me an email the next day saying, oh, it looks like, you were overpaid. We'll do an investigation. We recommend you not spend the money. We'll let you know. So I haven't heard from them since. So that money is sitting in the LAIF, the local agency investment fund.
So we're collecting interest off of it?
Yes.
Which is our money?
Yeah,
You don't have to give me interest back?
I don't think so. I don't know. They'll let me know. But anyway, yeah. So that's why sometimes
You just never know.
yeah. So so I'm hoping that they will that they'll be able to tell me the amount before the books are closed, so we can make these corrections. Yeah.
And one other thing that it's key to this. So not all agencies are created equal, and you never want to have an economic downturn or anything, but you also want to be positioned for it as a jurisdiction, and those that are better positioned for it are in play for things. And so when you think about shared services and potential consolidation in certain areas, this is where the conversation, this is where the rubber meets the road. So when you go into a recession prepared for that conversation and ready to go, like we are across multiple departments and agencies, things will happen. And so we're prepared for that as well.
So
And then is it the 20% reserve that we have? Do you think, is that adequate?
I believe so. Yeah, it would be good. Any, increase would be good. Yeah, the 20%. I mean, when you think about it, 20% is about 2.5 months worth of expenditure. So it's not a huge amount, but it's a good amount.
But we also have, again, the emergency
Yes.
reserve of and we also have been carrying over, even through COVID, we just moved some money, but multiple millions of dollars in the general fund,
Mhm.
unrestricted, just sitting there
Mhm.
available if we need it.
Mhm.
So if you added up all those reserves, we could be sitting at 30%.
Of 30%.
Plus or
Oh,
minus.
yeah, definitely. Yes. Yes. So, and I do feel that these numbers are fairly conservative. I mean, reasonably conservative, not overly so. I tend to budget that way. And as I said, in the current year, our revenue will exceed, the budgeted amount, even though I did increase some of them at the mid-year budget. Yeah. So I do feel.
And then on page 75 on the sales tax override fund, the 341,000 plus that's going in for disaster preparedness, what is that money going to be used for?
Okay, right there. Okay, $150,000 we will transfer to CMFA, and that will be used, well, not transfer, but it will be paid to them, and that will be used to do work on behalf of Corte Madera that we don't have the staff to do, and they will do. Then we make an additional contribution to the Marin Wildfire JPA fund of nearly $90,000, so that Larkspur and Corte Madera are contributing the same amount, an equal amount to that fund. That's in the CMFA books. But the money that's allocated from that JPA, that Marin Wildfire JPA, I believe has to do with population. So Larkspur's share, so to speak, is more than Corte Madera. So an additional nearly $90,000 will go to that. That 37,200 number, that's for like NRG related type of things. And then I did put $50,000 for just sort of like miscellaneous vegetation management that has to be done. And then I did put in some money for legal counsel, with regard to abatements in the past. Sometimes, that's been an expenditure.
Okay, so about 37,000 plus or minus will wind up going to NRGs
Mhm.
versus the other that's going out to other agencies, I want to say.
Yes. Well, Central Marin Fire is paying directly for the NRGs, but we pay, from here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's 150,000 for senior and youth programs. Do you know what that's going for and how we came up with that number? Because when I just look at the overall numbers, that's only like 2% of the total. It seems like 90 some odd percent plus or minus is all going for infrastructure.
Yeah, so really when we passed the sales tax measure, the key of it was an infrastructure tax. It was for infrastructure. But we also, at the time, disaster preparedness was really big, vegetation management. With the passage of Measure C, we've moved some of those monies from disaster preparedness to Measure C to the fire authority. The NRGs, it ebbs and flows. And so we're talking to the groups and we're seeing what they need. The coordinator position we pay for also. And so that's what that budget reflects. But a lot of times we've never said no. And so if a neighborhood group comes to us with a plan and it makes sense, we will find a way. We've never said no. So we'll bring that to council and we'll ask for approval. So it's really, we have other monies there just because it's not in the budget, but we wanted to show you what's currently being discussed and planned. As you know, senior programs go through Park and Rec, and as we start to rebuild it, and we'll talk about it, this is just the basic discussions with Ashley of staffing or any of the programming needs they need. We put a placeholder for 150, but you're right. I think as we go and we have these discussions and we actually have the cost of the programs, whatever we need to do, we'll budget there. You also have other, programs that go towards the seniors, right? And we've talked about that too. That's not necessarily reflected here. It would be somewhere else and some of the, safety improvements, helping them with permitting costs, things like that we're talking about as well. So again, it's a placeholder. I don't even know right now, if the 150 is completely.
Well, let's see, for senior, it's actually senior and youth projects at
Right.
150,000. And I believe it's 75% of one of the recreation coordinator, I think her position is for youth projects that is charged to this fund. And then I think it's 25% of another recreation coordinator that's works with senior projects that will be charged to this fund. That's the only items that I know about right now.
And we also treat it with, we have Patty and Carla doing good work on what they're doing. And again, when they have a program, and it's just like kind of how we handle NRGs, you got a good program and you need 10 or 15,000, it's justified. We bring that to council and we'll add that to the budget as
Okay.
well.
So it sounds like there's flexibility there. It's not carved in stone like that's
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah. And that's something we talk about all the time with the sales tax oversight committee as well. And so, we've always shared, we want to spend the money, we want to find, good programs. So, and then the groups know that who to go to and what to present, and we'll deliver it. So it's a moving target.
Okay. And then on page 95, 92 with the recreation fund.
Amazon.
For some reason, my timer went off on my phone. I guess it's time for me to stop talking. On page 93, if I'm reading this correctly, on Park and Rec with no general fund support, total revenue was $1,636,000. Total expenditures are $1,405,000, right?
Right, that's what's proposed, yes.
Okay. And then if you add in salaries, the 401, they run a deficit of about 100 and some odd thousand.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. I guess the question is that I think on one of the pages, it shows that their salaries are under the general fund.
Yeah.
Should their salaries be moved out of the general fund, moved to here so we get a true picture of if there's a deficit within Park and Rec, and then we can move money over from the general fund to cover that deficit?
We can do that. It's not all of the salaries that are paid for by the general fund. It's the director. And I think part of the new facilities attendant and some clerical help. So
Okay.
that's what's in the general fund, but yes, it can
Okay.
be charged here, yes.
Okay, yeah, because it just seems like in the perception, you could look at that, they're in the black, but they're really not because of the salaries. Okay. I think I probably have more, but legal services, I guess we're good. We're about even for last year on legal services,
Right.
about 300 some
I
odd
think it'll come
thousand.
in under, yes. And if I could just add one more thing that I forgot to add, it concerns the next item, that new position, the Public Works Inspector. I didn't include it in here because I didn't know about it at that time, but it's anticipated that an employee will be promoted into that position. So it'll be about an additional $10,000 to $20,000 compared to, what's in here now, when that will have to be added as well, probably at the mid-year budget. Yeah.
Okay, one other question, but it's not on the financial part. On code enforcement, page 33, it says there's 34 cases that remain open or active. That's like 17 or 18% of the cases that are open based upon 196. Is that typical? It just seems like 34 cases being open is a lot. And again, I don't know the dynamics. And then below that says 95 files created. I don't know what that means. I don't know. And again, it may not be financial related. It's just, I just saw the data and just wonder why there's so many cases that are open.
Yeah, well, a lot of the cases, they take a while. There's a lot. I mean, some of the code enforcement, it's tied to the building department as well and projects. And so it takes a while to come to a resolution. It's just not as simple as, issuing a fine. It's actually trying to problem solve and get them to where they need to be. And it could take months. And so but I will tell you that code enforcement has been a huge success just from the service. I think the service delivery of problem solving and helping our community, because it's just not the hammer. It's actually trying to find a way and working across admin, planning, building, public works. It's really freed up the directors to do their job and focus on what they need to. And again, bringing that service to our community. And this is one example, those open cases, that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of work, and he's going back and forth between the departments, getting information and trying to find a way to get to yes.
It seems like they're trying to problem solve, which is a
Yeah.
good thing instead of just slamming people. for lack of better words. Okay, that's all the questions I had. Any other questions? Leila, you good? Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this topic? Please raise your hand. We have one member from the public here who is smiling, which means and he's shaking his head. Doesn't matter. And then do we get any emails in?
We did not receive any emailed public comments, and I am still seeing no raised hands from online attendees.
Okay, thanks. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council. And at this point in time, we're just looking at providing direction to staff, and they'll bring it back to us at our next meeting for final approval. Who wants to start us off? Go ahead, Bob.
I will, since I've sat through more budgets than anybody in this room. I think this is my 14th or 15th annual budget meeting. And this is the best budget I've ever seen. This is remarkable. I mean, the strides the town has made in the last 10 years is just unbelievable. And I had a long talk with Todd about all this stuff yesterday. So Todd, excuse me if I bore you again, but I think we're in better shape than any town in Marin County right now. Really do, financially. Our pensions are under control. Our OPEB is under control. We've got a strong capital expenditures budget that is funded. We're building a new town hall. We have over 20% reserves. And what's really remarkable is we're improving service. We're doing all this and we're still improving service to the town. We're adding staff that is making us more responsive to the people in this town. So I think this is absolutely terrific. And I just want to thank Daria, Todd, Rebecca, and everyone else for all the work you've done on this, because 10 years ago, it was a mess, really. And you guys have done an incredible job. So thank you. And that'd be my direction, would be move forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Eli?
Thank you. I'll start by saying I strongly second Bob's comments. I just had a few kind of thoughts. One, just in terms of the presentation, this may be unique to me, but it might be helpful for me if we had after like the 2023 proposed column, if we had like a % change over the previous fiscal year's estimated actual, because that just it is a little more at a glance, I think, at least for me. So that might be helpful. A couple other things. I really liked Fred's comment with regards to sort of like streamlining, so to speak, how we show the Parks and Rec salaries and things like that. I think the more that we can kind of remove any like nesting dolls, the more transparent and easy to digest this becomes for someone like me who doesn't have a financial background. So appreciate and agree with that comment. Couple other things. I think if we had each department kind of go through and look through their major accomplishments again, these are all fantastic and everyone's accomplished a ton. I think some of these things maybe could be reviewed just for like the tone that it sets by calling them an accomplishment. And I'm thinking as a specific example of like, 60 parking violations cited or whatever, I don't know that that's an accomplishment. It's more just kind of a fact. And Todd, you know this better than anyone as a former police chief. But I think there's a mistaken perception among some residents that things like citations and fines are like something that the town values as a source of revenue. And in fact, they're not, obviously. I mean, our fines add up to what, like 45 grand of revenue for, a $20 million agency. But I think maybe we just take a look and just review again, like how we're framing and presenting accomplishments. And then the last thing would just be like maybe a quick proofread. I saw like some placeholder X's where there should be like dollar amounts and things like that. So we'll just want to take one more look through there and catch that kind of stuff. But all in all, this is fantastic. So thank you so much. The substance of what it shows, as Bob said, like really almost could not be better. And we're very fortunate. So thank you.
Leila?
Thanks. Yeah, I would just echo what's been said. Really appreciate the position that we're in through the hard work of our staff, and I support this budget. Please keep doing what you're doing.
Charles?
So I'm going to further the discussion about what Bob and everybody said. I think what I really like about the budget is usually when I think budgets or, town entities, it's how much did we take and are we spending it all or even need more, right? And that efficiency that we're talking about, it's like how much are you maximizing with each dollar that we're given? And I feel like for every dollar that's taken, we give $1.20 back, right? It's not even just a budget, I feel like the town is somehow making more value, adding value to actual currency, right? And that's really what's unprecedented about it, and kind of the shift in government that we're really all kind of analyzing. And I think that's really important to understand and hopefully emulate across broader, the broader region, not the world. So thanks. But maybe.
Just a couple of comments. I would just make that change if you can on the rec, moving the funds over. And I like the thing where there's flexibility within this budget. Again, I go back to the senior and youth programs where it's 150,000, but it's not like that number is the number for the next year. And that's it. If there's a program that Ashley comes back with, or Carla or Patty going, hey, we have this program, it looks like the town can support that. And I think one thing I like about this, I think we're being fiscally responsible just with all the numbers, how they all come together. But I think it's been built up over a number of years. It just didn't happen last week or last year. It happened with town councils 4 or 5, 6 or 7 years ago, where they started becoming more fiscally responsible. Let's set up a 20% reserve. Let's take the pension obligation bonds. I think it's all these little stepping stones that has led us to this point. And I would agree with Bob. I think I read in the IJ about other towns, and they either had to cut back, program services or whatever. We're not doing any of that. It's kind of like we're the Nordstroms and we're way up here. Well, I mentioned Nordstroms because Nordstrom's is high customer service. And I think you're also building a culture into all this also. So again, kudos to staff. And planning must have loved it because they all left before we finished this. So they knew it was all good. So again, I appreciate both you and all the hard work on this. So it sounds like you both have direction. Yeah. Okay. Oh, thanks. We'll see you next 2 weeks. Thanks. Okay, there's no other comments. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to business item 6A, consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 34/2022, calling for an election on November 8, 2022 for 3 council members, and a measure reviewing the special parcel tax for paramedic service and requesting County of Marin to consolidate the election. And I think this goes to Ruben and Amy, and Ruben and Amy are both on. I don't know which one of you would like to kick it off.
I can start off on the paramedic side of it, and then I'll give you a little bit of background of the paramedic tax, and then I'll hand it over to Amy to go ahead and discuss about the consolidation of the election for the town council members, if that's okay with you. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Casisas and members of the board. Ruben Martin, your fire chief. I'm here for you to consider adopting resolution 34/2022 to calling and giving notice of holding a special election on November 8th. The election is to consolidate 3 council members and submitting to the voters a measure to renew a special parcel tax for paramedic services, and requesting the Board of Supervisors of the County of Marin to consolidate said election, setting forth the requirements of that election. And a little bit of background on the Corte Madera tax measure. The voters of the town of Corte Madera in 1983 passed a special paramedic tax as part of the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority special tax, which was a JPA that was formed in 1982 as an 8-member agency, which covers all the towns and special districts from Fairfax all the way to us here in Corte Madera. The RVPA in 1982 found the need for paramedics within the greater Ross Valley area, and the best way to provide that service was through the fire departments that already existed and provided some basic emergency care to our constituents. What we found through the RVPA, which is a tremendous agency, is that they only provided 1 paramedic ambulance that covered the entire 8-member agency. And that paramedic ambulance was within the town of Ross and would go and respond to calls from Fairfax all the way to Corte Madera. So there may be times within the Corte Madera area where our constituents were waiting prolonged times for that transport ambulance to get them to their final destination or medical facility where they can receive the best care possible. With that, in 1998, the town decided to, with the renewal of that special paramedic tax, was to kind of become a subcontractor to the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority and provide our own paramedic services to our own constituents, our own towns. And part of that provided was getting our own ambulance here in town, which then augmented the entire service area with 2 paramedic ambulances. This service has definitely provided a much better service delivery model and increased the service that we provide to our local constituents here within the Central Marin area, especially within the town of Corte Madera. This is not a new tax. It's a renewal of an existing tax. Every 4 years, we come back to you and to the town voters to try to renew this special tax. Just for example, the special tax is a primary funding source for paramedic services within the town of Corte Madera. And what it does is a parcel tax for every residential living unit and for every 1,000 square feet of non-residential living unit or commercial space, so to speak. And in 2018, when we passed or we presented this to the voters of Corte Madera, it passed, I want to say, by over 70%. And this generally annually collects about $485,000 that then is used to go ahead and provide those paramedic services throughout the town of Corte Madera. And then, like I mentioned, it's every 4 years that we come to both yourselves and the voters to try to renew the special tax. And I'll hand it over to you, Amy.
Good evening, council members. I have very little to add other than we will have 3 council seats up for election in November, and the resolution follows the elections code requirements for calling the election and consolidating Corte Madera's municipal election with the general state election that will occur, and calls on the county to carry out the functions on behalf of Corte Madera for tallying the votes and operating the election on behalf of Corte Madera. Happy to take any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions from any council members? No? Okay.
I do.
Go ahead, Eli.
Thank you. Just for my education, I'd just like to understand a little bit better, like the kind of context here. So most of Ross Valley gets their paramedic service through the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. That includes Larkspur, right?
That's correct.
But then Corte Madera, which shares a fire department with Larkspur, pays for, with our own Corte Madera specific tax, to ambulances and crews that work through the fire department that we share with Larkspur. So I'm just trying to understand it, and maybe that I'm kind of misunderstanding the situation, but does that make sense? To have these 2 agencies sharing a fire department, which provides paramedic services to one of them. I mean, I know like if there's emergency in Larkspur and our paramedics are closer, they'll be the ones to respond. But like, does that make sense functionally?
Yeah. So just a little background and context on when we were both individual agencies. So let's go before 2018, prior to the consolidation. Larkspur was part of the RVPA proper, which then had monies given back to the fire department from the RVPA to provide paramedics on each engine. So they pay for an ALS paramedic service on an engine, for that assessment engine. The town of Corte Madera at the time, to be able to provide an ambulance service, had its own tax measure on the books, so that way it collected revenue in order to staff up that second ambulance and paramedic ambulance and paramedics for the engine companies. Now, move forward to past 2018 and the consolidation, we are then providing still that paramedic ambulance service to the town of Corte Madera and still receiving a revenue funding from RVPA for those to offset some of those costs with the paramedics. So they would be 7 paramedic positions technically originally with the city of Larkspur, then we still get revenue for that offsets that additional funding that would be needed to, per se, if we only had 1 paramedic tax, so to speak. So what the RVPA pays for half of the engine paramedics and the Corte Madera tax pays for the other half, and provides that second ambulance and 2 additional paramedics on duty per day.
Got it.
And just to follow up, the chief did an excellent job. I'll give you a little slightly different perspective of, for us, again, our revenues, as the chief said, they come strictly back to Corte Madera. They're not shared with Larkspur. And the reason being is we purchased those ambulance rigs and the training for it. We've had a number of discussions and we're continuing to have them with the chief and with the RVPA and with Larkspur. It makes a lot of sense for us, for Larkspur at some point to do something similar to what we're doing. And we run those revenues equally through Central Marin Fire Authority.
Right.
That makes the most sense. If we
Right.
were to do it right now, the RVPA would probably fold. They
Okay.
couldn't balance their budget, just
Yeah.
a big picture. And so we want to be good partners. We've been doing this for decades. And so we're having these conversations and trying to find ways to make sense, what that makes sense for everybody. But,
That's helpful. Thank you. I think that's like the
and I
piece that
think-
was missing for me. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Ruben, as well. Very helpful.
You got it.
Any other questions from council members? No. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Is there anybody from public wishing to speak on this topic? We have one hand raised so far. It is Roy Wolford.
Oops. Okay, I should be unmuting Roy. Roy, you should be able to talk now.
Good evening. I'm in favor of the paramedic service. I've been treated twice and it was excellent service. The one thing that should be put on the ballot in description, though, to eliminate any confusion, when a person's treated and doesn't go to the emergency room, there's no additional billing. It's all covered by the funding of the service. But if you get transported to the hospital and go to the emergency room, there is a bill to the patient that is either covered by their insurance or they have to cover it themselves. So I remember the first time they ever got transported to the hospital, all of a sudden I got a bill and I was wondering, hey, why did I get a bill? I'm paying the tax. So just wanted to make that clarification, but the service has been terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy. I don't see any other hands raised and nobody present from wishes to speak. Thank you. Do we have any emails that came in on this?
Double checking again. And no, we did not receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Thanks. So with that, I will go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to Kent Town Council for a motion to approve resolution number 34/2022.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? We're fighting over it.
Second.
Thanks. Any other discussion? Go ahead and call for the vote.
Councilmember Beckman,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazia,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lee,
Yes.
and Mayor Casissa.
Yes. And Amy, quick question, because there was a second part to this question, the county, I'm going to consolidate the election. Do we need to vote on that or do anything with that? Or is it
No,
into the
the-
resolution?
The resolution contains everything.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, before we move on, Mayor, if I may, there is a spot on the election and I got caught up in calling the vote and forgot my notes. There's a spot in the election with the blanks for two names, to name two council members to work with town staff to work on such items as a, Amy, help me out. Thank you. Ballot argument.
Ballot argument.
Argument in favor of the resolution. And if we receive any opposition to the resolution, that same team would also help draft a rebuttal to the opposition letter and also would recruit up to 5 community members to help sign on to the ballot statement.
I don't mind volunteering. Is there someone else that'd like to volunteer? We need 2 council.
I'm happy to help if no one else wants to, but there was a really good ballot argument draft in as part of the packet for this item, right?
I believe it also needs signatures, but
Oh, okay.
if there are any changes to it, or if we do get those rebuttals, we would have to bring that back to council. And we also canceled 2 meetings on the summer meeting schedule on the consent calendar this evening. So we did want to avoid having to schedule a special meeting to bring anything back.
So I'm sorry, you need 2 council members?
Yes.
Okay, so you have Eli and myself.
Eli.
Thanks. We're going to move to 6B, which is create consideration proposal, hire public works inspector for the Public Works Department and possible direction of staff for creation of a new position. With that, I will turn it over to Todd. Thank you. RJ, sorry. I'm trying to multitask.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Casissa. So as you mentioned, this is an item to consider adding a public works inspector. And this really is an item that is really brought forth by the Sanitary District. As you all know, Sanitary District 2 is a subsidiary to the town of Corte Madera. And as a result, the town of Public Works, the town of Corte Madera Public Works Department does provide the staffing and services for Sanitary District 2, including in this situation, inspection services and for private sewer laterals, amongst other things. And so one of the biggest changes that you're all aware of, back in 2018, we had a new private sewer lateral ordinance go into effect August of that year, which had 4 triggers that required inspections. So that's when you cumulative building improvements of 50,000 or more over a 3-year span, when a property is sold or a title has transferred, when you have a sewer overflow on that property, or when the adjacent sewer or roadway is improved. And because of that ordinance, there has been a significant increase in the overall inspections and in the overall private sewer laterals that are requiring work. In the scheme of things, that's great. That means better overall infrastructure and more environmentally responsible infrastructure as well. But to oversee and administer and facilitate all of those improvements, there's a lot of inspection work that happens. And in those 3.5 years, we've seen 1,350 or more PSL inspections and permits, which if you break it down, that's about 24% of our overall district. And if you break it down to a week, that's about 7.5 inspections per week over that span of time. So there's quite a lot of inspection and time going into that process. And when we first started, many of those inspections were really handled by higher level engineers. And in some smaller situations, there was some consultants, but really we kind of thought it was best managed internally. But at the onset, it was done by assistant engineers and project managers. That initial person was also given a heavy load to also manage capital improvement projects and other maintenance program oversight, and it became a task that was unreasonable for one person to handle. And we also thought there was an opportunity to find some other staff members that could assist, and potentially at a lesser salary range. So since then, we brainstormed. We had a couple options. One was to go back to the consultant route, and at the time of when this really started happening, it was late 2019. The rates we were getting for inspection were in the $190 to $200 an hour range for a consultant inspector to come in for inspections. So we didn't think that was the best prudent and financially responsible option. So we looked at other internal staff to potentially cross-train and give some breach assignments through some voluntary opportunities. That's gone well. We have a person who's been acting as an out-of-class senior maintenance worker on a voluntary measure to get trained up, to get the expertise needed to fulfill those, and has been doing that well in an informal capacity. And it's been quite some time, and it has been working well, and I think it's been providing a great benefit to the town and the district. And we think it's a good time to bring this forward to formalize this in a new classification within Public Works. To provide some additional numbers, if you take that 8 inspections or so a week at about an hour and a half each inspection, if we went the consultant route at about $195 an hour and 52 weeks. Right there, that's about $120,000 per year for a limited consultant role of about 12 hours a week. And that alone would pay for an individual doing this with the 12 hours, but then with the remainder of the time contributing to other ways in the town and the district, which is how we've been kind of operating on this informal basis. And so with that, that is what we have before you, and that's kind of the history of where we've been getting to this point. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, RJ. Any questions from town council members? I just have one. How easy or hard is it to fill a position like this, given today's job market?
Yeah, it is difficult. And I say that because I'm aware of some other agencies locally that have tried, and one in particular has tried for, I believe, 2 years unsuccessfully, and has had to lean on other agencies in a shared service capacity. So it is challenging. And so we're fortunate to have some options before us that are, have some cost saving measures as well.
Thanks. No other questions from town council members? I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Anyone from public wishing to speak on this topic, please raise your hand via Zoom. At this time, I don't see any hands raised and nobody from the public wishing to speak in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Casissa. We did not receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Thanks. I will go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to town council. And we're looking forward to, do we need a vote on this, Amy? Or is it just, I know it's a 2-meeting process.
I think at this point, it's just informational, and you'll vote on the second.
Okay, thanks. If there's no comments, I think we have direction.
One comment. Huge improvement in service again, providing someone who can come in every week and provide context, what's going on with other inspections. It's another big improvement in service by the town for the residents. So I'm absolutely for this. Thanks.
I couple that with the cost benefit also.
Yeah,
Charles?
and I just did the quick math. So what he said is we would get for the money, we would either get 48 hours of the same service, or if we did it internally, we get 128 hours of that service plus more. So, going back to the idea of adding value for dollars spent, I really appreciate it. So
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, I think RJ, you have your direction and we'll see you next meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Casissa.
With that, we'll go ahead and move to council reports. Todd, town manager report.
Just real quick, I want to let the council know that staff, we've had a number of meetings, kind of all hands on deck to really put our heads together and discuss our recent appeal and maybe some of the shortcomings and things that we could have done better. And so we're going to bring something back to you. It'll probably be towards, just because we have the timing of everything towards the end of the summer, it doesn't mean anything's getting done. What I'll tell you internally, just big picture, and it's part of that in-house inspector that we're hiring. We've already corrected internally some of the lessons learned to make sure it doesn't happen again to what we can control. So that's in place. We are going to come back to you though with an overview and really have just a back and forth discussion with the council of scenarios and really, the things that we're faced with, owning what we could have done better. And then also the reporting side for some of these contractors. Some of the boards we'll bring something to you again towards the end of the summer. We don't have the statute of limitations. We're not under a time crunch, but we heard you and all of your concerns, I think, that you voiced in the meeting. I think we'll be able to answer them publicly probably in the next couple months. So that is coming.
Thanks. Any questions for Todd? I just have one question for you. Can you just comment on the fire that happened in Scott Valley, just really high level on that incident? Because I know people from Corte Madera could see smoke coming from Scott Valley. And I understand, I think they put it out pretty quickly, but just.
Yeah, it was a small vegetation fire, 2 cars caught on fire and a house was engulfed. And so again, the response was outstanding by Mill Valley Fire and surrounding agencies. But again, that time of night, it was windy and you see that come over the hill. It's just a reminder of for all of us to be diligent. One thing that the mayor shared with me when he first got into his position was that he wanted to see some possible tabletop scenarios. Our energies are doing a lot of work, but to take the Christmas Tree Hill Dwellers Association and their energy and do a tabletop. And so we're trying to work with public safety right now to put that together. And then again, we'll take the lessons learned from that tabletop scenario and move it around the bowl, so to speak, and hit all the energy groups.
Thanks. Any questions for Todd? No? We'll move to council reports. Eli?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two quick items. Central and Sanitation Agency is continuing their labor negotiations with their bargaining groups. It's been a pretty protracted negotiation. I think both sides are hoping for a 5-year contract, so we really obviously want to make sure that we get everything right. So that process is continuing, but the tone is good. I think folks are seeing eye to eye and working together constructively. So that's good for everyone. The other thing, those of you who attended the last week's or 2 weeks ago MCCMC meeting, you got the update from all of the various ad hoc committees. One of them was our water policy committee, and just a quick update on that. We're working now on developing a final report. I think some of the most important things that's going to provide for councils throughout Marin is a menu of policy options at the local level of what can we do to really reduce water consumption, water waste especially, and then B, helping lay out a blueprint and resources to identify funding for larger scale long-term infrastructure projects, things like recycled water, banking water and aquifers, things like that. So that report is forthcoming. We're aiming to have that out in time for the June meeting of MCCMC. That is all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, from the last meeting, we talked about, we had a police council meeting. We approved the new budget, slight increase for the town, but still being held down dramatically from what it could have been because of our merger, which is going to be 10 years, I guess, in change, which is remarkable. That it's been 10 years since we merged with San Anselmo. We approved a new building maintenance budget. We also approved new salaries, including Chief Norton's. We had a fire council meeting a month ago also where we approved a new budget. And I believe we named a new chairman of the fire council, Rebecca, didn't we? I think we did. I was going through my notes and
That is correct.
I thought we did, yes.
We
and
did.
It's Eli,
He's
right?
sitting on the other end of the dice.
That's just wanted to make sure we announced that. And
Was this when I had COVID? What?
Yeah, it was.
Oh.
I think- Don't worry, I was the alternate for you, so it's all good.
Okay, thank you. Oh, right, yeah.
See what happens when you don't show up?
Yeah, thank you.
Congrats.
it was your turn. You're running the meeting next time. Get ready.
Yeah.
And also I got we all got a terrific email from Ruben the other day. Central Marin Fire got a $3.25 million grant for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, which we presented, I think, about a month ago from the Marin Wildfire Protection Association. That's almost half the cost of that project. I mean, this is just a remarkable achievement by these guys. And I just wanted to also shout out and thank Ruben and also Todd Landau, who we hired a couple years ago and has been a huge asset to Central Marin Fire. But these guys brought this money in, and this is going to be a huge start in getting this project done. So thank you to those guys. Okay, that's it.
Thanks. Leela?
Nothing to report. Thanks.
Thanks. Charles?
I attended the Transportation Authority of Marin meeting. There wasn't anything new to report. It's just a reminder that the new North-South Greenway extension going over Sir Francis Drake and Corte Madera Creek will be opening in this next month, and there'll be a ribbon cutting. But I think the vast majority of the path is already open to the public. So go check it out if you have a chance. It's beautiful weather to ride a bike or walk. So
Thanks. Thanks. We've walked that many times. They did a really good job on it. Like, it's really nice. And for me, I'm just going to rattle these off because some have been covered. I did go to the police council as well as a fire council, age-friendly Corte Madera, which just a reminder that on September 18th at the community center, we're going to be honoring our 90-year-old plus residents. I attended Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness Committee, which was this last week. And then the biggie was I attended the Park and Rec Dance Party, which I think was a couple weeks ago on a Friday night. Really good job by Ashley and her crew. There's a lot of families out there with young kids just jamming away to a DJ. She brought in pizza. So I think it was really good to get people out of COVID and coming back for social events. So good job on her part. And with that, I don't have anything else. We have the draft agenda for the next meeting. And if there's no further business to come before the council, I will go ahead and close the meeting and adjourn it. And we will move into the Sanitary 2 District meeting. And with that, Rebecca, can we get a roll call, please?
Board Member Beckman,
Here.
Board Member Mongan,
Here.
Board Member Avazio,
Here.
Board Vice President Lee,
Here.
and Board President Casissa.
Here, and with that, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment. This gives the opportunity from public to comment on anything that is not on the agenda. If you wish to comment, please raise your hand or go to the podium. Do we get any emails? I just have to pick you on. Sorry, you're in the crowd.
We did not receive any emailed public comments,
Thanks,
and
I
I
do
currently
not
see no
any
raised
hands raised,
hands.
So we'll go ahead and close public comment. We do not have any presentation. We'll move to the consent calendar. These are items which are routine in nature and they don't require further discussion. They can be approved by a single motion. Any member of the district board, staff, or public may request an item be removed for further discussion. And with that in mind, is there anybody from the board, staff, or public that wishes to have an item removed for further discussion? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. And with that, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion to approve consent items 4A and 4B.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And no further discussion. Go ahead and call for the vote.
Board Member Beckman,
Yes.
Board Member Mongan,
Yes.
Board Member Avazio,
Yes.
Board Vice President Lee,
Yes.
and Board President Casissa.
Yes, and with that, we'll move to public hearings, which is review proposed sanitary district 2 operating budget for fiscal year 2022 and 23 and provide direction to staff. You're back up.
Okay, thank you. As the Public Works Director mentioned, the Sanitary District is a subsidiary district of the town. It's considered a special district and it issues its own set of financial statements, and it's also included in the town's financial statements. And it does not have any employees. The Sanitary District does reimburse the town for the time that the town employees spend on sanitary district work, mainly engineering and maintenance expenditures. The estimated amount in this budget that the sanitary district will pay the town is approximately $1,042,000. The sanitary district budget is the last section in the budget binder that you received. And you can see on page 97 that the sanitary district receives the vast majority of its budget, budgeted revenue from property tax. It receives nearly 4 million, and then the sewer district user charge, nearly 2.8 million, and then about $145,000 from various other sources. In terms of the operating expenses, that's nearly $4.9 million. And that includes the payment that I just mentioned for town employee work, and also includes over $1 million to Central Marin Sanitation Agency, which is the agency that provides the management and organizational services for the wastewater collections systems and the collection pump maintenance. Also included in the expenditures are the CMSA pump maintenance in the amount of $510,000, sewer maintenance repairs for $325,000, and the sanitary district's portion of the CMSA debt service is included as well for nearly $669,000. And then there are various other supplies, utilities, and miscellaneous type of things. And then I did include depreciation expense at the recommendation of the district's auditor, which is $1.4 million. Then in addition to those operating expenses totaling nearly $4.9 million, there is the debt service payment, which I mentioned. And then also $1,150,000 in grant and loan programs. Then on page 98, the planned capital services that are there in that right-hand column. And then also included on the last page, page 99, are the actuals for not the current fiscal year, but the previous fiscal year, showing the projects and their expenses that were spent. And then going back to page 96, you will see that the estimated ending net position as of June 30th, 2023 is expected to be approximately $34.8 million. However, $30 million of that is invested in capital assets. And there's also the reserve of $2.5 million to be used in case it's an emergency reserve. And then the unrestricted portion is approximately $2.3 million.
Any questions? Eli?
Go ahead. All right. I was just curious, so when we look at net investment in capital assets, that's basically the assessed value of like every pipe and pump station. Why do we do that and look at net position for the sanitary district and not for the town?
Because the governmental accounting rules, according to those rules, the town is on what's known as a modified accrual accounting system, which is a fund-based accounting system, which shows basically current revenues and expenditures in its fund statements. But then when you get the financial statements that the auditors issue each year, they're converted to full accrual. And you do see in that system, you do see all of that, the capital assets and everything. But the sanitary district, which is a special district, the rules, it's not a fund-based it's not a modified accrual, it's a full accrual. So that's why, I mean, it's just a rule that we have to follow. So when these capital projects are completed, they go directly onto the balance sheet.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. I was going to ask something similar. I mean, for me, when it's an investment and it's not actually part of the budget of the yearly, so we have $30 million in pipe, right? And then because the actuary said take 1.4 in depreciation, which is probably for a tax deduction. Is that why you're depreciating it like on the books?
He just thought I should show it there just so that you know that there's depreciation occurring,
Is there benefit like to doing that?
No,
As far as
the sanitary district doesn't pay taxes, nor does the town. No, it doesn't pay income tax. No, I think it's just the reason he recommended that, I think, is just to show that, assets are being depreciated and may need to be replaced, so that you could plan.
So could that be a different like breakout column
about
basically what we own and how it's falling off, so that we understand like longer term budgeting towards having to keep upgrading or keeping those things going? Only because at the end it looks like we have $40 million budget, but really we're talking about much smaller numbers of how we're dealing with the sewer district. And I think that would be more appropriate for really everyone to understand the yearly budget versus grander kind of, if possible. I don't know all the counting rules that you're under, but I think it would be a little clearer if it was laid out that way.
We have new auditors and I'll ask him what he recommends. He'll be the third auditor. Each of the previous auditors had different ways they recommended, but I'll tell him, what you want. Ask him. Yes.
I'm not asking that it isn't accounted for or anything. I'm just saying, to me, or like understanding what are the real flexible pieces and what are just things that are fixed in place for 10, 15 years. We can talk about budgeting towards, bond issue, whatever but they're not in a yearly like fluctuation and understanding of what might change. They're like long-term expenditures or something like a different category would be helpful for me. I don't know if the other council fits. Okay, thanks.
I have a couple questions on the district user charges. How do those work? Those like variable, or are they fixed?
There's a fixed amount. It's $498 per parcel, and then there's $2 county fee so it appears on the actual tax bill as $500.
Okay. Is that ever evaluated, or has that been the same for the last?
It's been the same for the last 10 decades, probably.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Okay.
So right now we're doing a sewer update. RJ's doing the work, and so we'll come back to you with some recommendations on some of these fees. And And RJ, if you want to jump in on that work.
Yeah, I just got a little update on the schedule. We'll probably have something internally to look at toward the end of the year and probably start having those discussions with the community at the turn of 2023. For the
Okay.
rate study and also that'll include an analysis on our sewer pipe condition as well as our other assets, force mains and pump stations, and really kind of start to create that guiding document for infrastructure improvements for the next 10 or so years.
Okay, thanks. And then on the grant and loan programs, how many people are taking advantage of these programs? Because when I just look at the numbers, for 2022, the revised budget is like 50,000, and for 2000, it's some of these numbers, it doesn't look like anybody's taking advantage of these programs.
Yeah, so pretty much everyone is eligible for at least the $1,500 if they do an upgrade to bring their sewer lateral up to standard. Some of the programs aren't getting utilized. I don't know that we've had a loan program come through, although it's nice to have that option should someone really need it. We have had a couple, but not too many of the low income grant programs come through. The lower lateral has been the big one, as many of you have seen the projects going around town, and so in those we're addressing hundreds of private sewer laterals all as part of one summer project, and that has been a big source of those grant funds. And yeah, so it's a little kind of scattered, but it's heavily on the lower lateral and just the standard $1,500 grant program.
It's just something we may want to take a look at, because if we have money out there and people aren't taking advantage of it, I don't know if there's some reason behind that.
Well, so I think RJ, in the past, when this came up and we approved the funding for this grant program, you said if it wasn't being utilized correctly, that we should review it as the council. And it sounds like you're starting to get more data about that, and maybe we'd like to see that moving forward.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that discussion would be a good one with to go hand in hand with the rate study, because we'll really have a good sense of our capital improvement needs, our needs on the grant program to assist our ratepayers in our district in upgrading the facilities on the private side, and then also what does that look like for rates going forward.
Thanks. And then one last question on capital expenditures, 2022 sewer rehabilitation. Casa Buenas in there. Is work still going to be done there? Because I know PG&E is going to be doing work, and I thought we were holding off on any work there, but I know you did some sewer work there, I think close to where Tesla's at.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, I'll try to simplify it. So we have had a project last summer. It's really part of this initiative to increase capacity on Meadow Suite and leading up to Tamalpais, which really takes the whole west part of town and puts it in one large trunk sewer that eventually goes under the freeway. And so that one is one of our critical spots. When we have a big rain, we're focusing a lot of time monitoring that and keeping our eyes on it, because that's one of the ones that's likely to overflow first if we do have that much inundation. And so as a result, we're trying to invest in these phased projects to increase the capacity on Meadow Suite. Separate of that, and obviously close in vicinity geographically, we have the Casa Buena Complete Streets project. And as part of that, we're doing the sewer upgrades. And so we know we have this large PG&E project coming, two of them actually, large gas transmission, 2023 and 2024. We had those plans ready to go, designed to go this summer. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to build those just so PG&E can cut right down the center of them. So we've deferred the complete street component of the project, which is the paving, the sidewalk, retaining walls, that sort of thing. But we do have an opportunity this summer, since PG&E is not ready for their project until 2023, to at least get in there and do the sewer portion. And so we're going to take advantage of the time that we have to do that here. And that project is currently out to bid.
Thanks. Go ahead, Charles.
So to follow up on the Meadow Suite, the larger trunk line, that inundation, does that threaten 101? And ultimately, have we asked Caltrans or explored the, a potential for a grant funding to help preserve the 101 corridor, either through our, grant that they gave us about the climate assessment or through other means? Because I know that last year that area did overflow at the, at that first large rain. I think that was within their own right of way, but trying to find additional partnerships to alleviate those kind of threats would be good if you've already done it, but if not, if you think that there's some possibility to that.
I think that would probably be more on our storm drain master plan side. If we do see, a connection there that we can approach Caltrans. But I think on the sewer side, they're pretty much separate systems that don't interact as much. But we're still, midway through both of our master plans for sewer and storm drain. And so we'll have to.
Right.
Really
So with that, what's the technique of enlarging the capacity under the freeway? Is it a new utilidor type scenario where you could have shared services flow through there?
So it's not so much the facility under the freeway that we're concerned about. It's really as you start at Tesla or right at the edge of the 101 corridor and you work up toward, Tamalpais and beyond. One of the areas closer to Lakeside is it's a shallower manhole and shower pipeline. And so as effluent builds up, it doesn't have the capacity it would in other parts of the system. So the strategy is twofold. When we look at improving capacity, it's increasing the diameter of the pipe, also increasing the depth of the pipe. Because it's okay if it surcharges as long as it doesn't exit the manhole, right? So when we look at designing and improving those projects, those are kind of the two strategies we look at. The project that is out to bid, we're also taking, we have a pump station, the Lakeside pump station, which currently is a force main. So as you have these pump stations, you have a wet well, and they aren't running uniformly, consistently at all the same rate at one time. They build up the wet well and then they let it out in a more concentrated event. And that connection point is kind of near the base of Sausalito. And so in a storm, when you already have a lot of effluent coming down from Tamalpais, and then you have that surcharging event or that pumping event, you also have this spike in flow. And so we're actually planning to reroute that Lakeside pump station to a manhole further downstream that has more elevation and cover, and therefore improves and reduces the likelihood of an overflow in that area.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Anybody from public wishing to speak on this topic, please raise your hand. Any emails?
We did not receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board. Any other comments? Yeah, Eli, you're good. Okay. All right. So I think you have direction. Okay.
Yes, thank
Thanks. And we'll see you at our next meeting. Thanks. We don't have any business items. District manager report. Hey, RJ, you blanked out there for a minute. I didn't know if that was your report.
Not today, thank you.
I guess you didn't have anything. Okay. Any board member reports? Okay, with that, we have the draft agenda for next week. And if there's no further business to come before the board, I will go ahead and adjourn the SB2 meeting. Thank you very much. We're done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.